Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Cloud Architects podcast. Today, a little different, just the three of us here. I'm joined by Nick.
Hello.
And Warren.
Oh, I wasn't ready. That's so funny.
So the beginning of the podcast, and Warren's already broken.
Yep. Well, we missed you last time, Warren. I got to say the energy's a little is different when you're not around.
Yeah, you don't have anybody butting in while a person's
True.
trying to talk.
It's true.
So
Okay.
this
That's okay.
episode a little
I
different today from what we usually do. This is actually also episode 50 of the podcast, and I think we have a couple of short episodes and special editions. So episode 55 in its entirety, but labeled episode 50. So that's a pretty cool milestone, I guess, as well. So just the three of us today, no guests. So if you're used to listening to our antics, you'll know we usually always have a guest or two or three sometimes on the show. But today, just the three of us here, and we're really excited because we just get to hang out and talk about a whole raft of different things. So, guys,
maybe we should start with the how many. So it's 50 episodes, right?
Yeah.
And we've had 40,000 listens, and we know that this is true because obviously we pay the SoundCloud and FeedBlitz subscriptions. So 40,000. What is that per episode?
I didn't realize I was doing math on the show.
No, but I'm just saying that's
I'm unprepared for this episode,
guys. That's pretty cool, right?
No, it is cool.
I think something that perhaps maybe we should talk about is about which are the more popular episodes, and I guess a lot of them are security, right? But then we've got a lot that are based around community.
Yep.
And a lot that are based sort of around diversity, which seem to be sort of pretty significant when it comes to COVID and the times that we're having right now. Like Tracy van der Scaife. I mean, that was a big one. And our Anna Chu videos about inclusion. And I mean, we got a bit deep around how COVID had affected her life and her job, and I mean everybody else's for that matter.
I mean, I felt that too, right? And that really resonated with me. I wasn't on that episode, but I remember listening to it, and it just spoke to me. But I will also venture to say that anything we do with Anna, whenever Anna comes on, I mean, she's basically a honorary cloud architect anyway at this point. Whenever she comes on, it's always a fun episode, but it always is a very, very popular episode as well. I think in some highlights also, I think over the years is when we've done things with Julia Forehand. That was great. That was a really, really good episode too. It was so much fun doing that. And I guess also, being at Ignite and being there in person, doing in-person stuff is kind of cool. So that one was really, really cool. And then Greg, anything that we do with Greg Taylor is always super, super fun because he's just so funny, right? I remember when we did our hybrid configuration wizard talk with him, and he tried to swipe my Mac screen because he thought it was touchscreen. So it's been a really good time. I mean, I think we if I think back to when everything started, I mean, you guys kind of got the ball rolling on this, and I remember I was actually working in Memphis. So this would have been 2017, I think. I was working in Memphis with a customer there, and I was traveling every week. And I don't remember if you shared this with me directly. I don't think so. I think I found it somehow. And it was like episode 2 that you guys did with Alistair. And I thought, this is cool stuff that you guys are doing. I mean, Alistair is Alistair, right? So needed the beeping machine on that one. But
all I remember was his husky voice.
Yep.
His husky voice. And then when I actually met him in person, I was like, way skinnier than I thought.
And so I remember, so I think the first episode I did was episode 4, and I was in Memphis in a hotel, and it was like 6 a.m. And I was trying to keep my voice down so that I wasn't waking up everyone around me, which is really hard when you have a headset on because you can't hear yourself. But yeah, no, it's been a lot of fun. I definitely miss the in-person stuff, so I think we can all agree we've been a little bit it's delayed or relaxed in releasing episodes over the last year, just because the majority of the recordings we do, we try and aim for a couple times a year when we get together, where we're in person and we can record, several sessions over a 2 or 3 day period. And of course, that hasn't happened. But I look forward to travel resuming at some point.
I remember when I got a opportunity to be with the two of you at Microsoft Studios, and all I needed to do was look at the camera and say, "Cloud technology and the people in it," and I couldn't remember our byline. And the funny thing is that episode 2, I kind of think of as our first episode, because
Mm.
the first episode we ever did was horrendous. It was
Yeah.
terrible.
We were sitting
And
outside. It was on your terrace, I think, and
yes,
we didn't know. We were trying so hard to put something together instead of just letting it sort of fall together.
Yeah.
I remember it was hard, eh? It
But
was
I
very
think
hard.
I think we've come such a long way, and by no means can I say that this is a perfect, from every point of view, right? I think that there are a lot of people who do podcasts, and everyone has their own different style. But I think that it's taken us. We kind of fell into a way of doing things, which I think works really well for us. I think ultimately, in the beginning, especially, I remember those first few ones we did at Ignite 2017 or the first Ignite we were at. We were very stiff with those because we essentially tried to script out the whole episode before we did the episode, right? So
Yeah, but
you
that's
end
what
up
we
kind of.
do, right? We're architects. I mean,
Exactly,
it's
and
how we
so
work.
we've put so
Yeah.
much planning into every single episode. And I remember when we were preparing to get up to Ignite, Nick said, "Well, we should try and record about 5 or 6 over the week." And I was like, 5 or 6? Are you insane? Like, how much effort are we gonna have to put into recording 5 or 6 episodes? And we spent a lot of time in those days with show notes and basically every question we wanted to ask. And I think. Looking back at them now, they were important episodes because they kind of got us into the groove a little bit. But
mm,
at
mm,
the same time, I think we've learned to relax a lot over the
mm,
last 50 episodes, and so now it's a lot more just free flowing conversation. And I think
yeah,
that is the style that works for us, right? We have personalities that work better in that kind of relaxed, free flowing style. We're a lot less picky on the edit now. I remember the first few we would take weeks to edit just because we were
Mm.
trying to get rid of every stumble and every little
yeah,
thing. I think we're starting to be a little bit more relaxed about it as
Do
well,
you,
just because it doesn't detract from the episode.
mm.
You know what I mean? So occasionally we still need to do things, but for the most part, it doesn't. It's been a good journey. I think it's been a lot of fun. So like I
and
said, I'm
editing
looking.
is vital, right? Do you
Yeah.
remember the time? And I'm going to say this now because it's funny. But do you remember the time at Ignite and I needed to pee so bad? We-
I was wondering
we-
which one you're going to pull out of the bag, and I'm glad it's just that one.
Yes.
yeah, no, there've been a couple, but um, like I find our best episodes are the ones that are generally unscripted. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
The ones that where what happens is we sort of go on a tangent and we sort of hit the personal aspects of the people that we're talking to, where something, even though they're talking about the technology and we're trying to make a pretty impactful point, generally there's how many people have asked Tony Redmond why his Twitter handle is what it is, right? So we did it.
I have.
And then, when I look, I may have stepped a couple of boundaries when I asked which CEO was better as we got through the Microsoft ones, but generally most people gave a really good answer.
Mm.
They would give a non-biased sort of honest answer about how they felt for each CEO, and it wasn't like, okay, well, name this one because this one is the best. Nobody ever said this one is the best, and
Mm.
nobody ever said this one's the nicest. They gave like an overall perspective on what it was to
Mm.
work for the company at that time, and it sort of achieved the results. But then again, like I said, editing is great. And there was a Ignite episode. We were running backwards and forwards, and it also gives some sort of indication of how busy we were generally at Ignite.
Mm,
So it was 5 days, go, 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 go. And when
mm,
you're done going, go some more, because there's more things to be seen. There's more people to be talking to.
mm,
There's hundreds, if not thousands, of MVPs. There's all these amazing people that you get to meet. I mean, like, if we have to take Summit and we like meet Mark Rosinovich, you see his talks now on the latest digital ignites, right? And you get to see all the cool stuff that they're doing with quantum computing and orbital and all that stuff, and you're like, I met that guy.
mm.
He's about this high. He's
It,
like
it, it it gets
way taller
really
than
intense for sure.
you
But I remember the one you're talking about because there was one episode that we did. I think it was our second Ignite where we were recording in a particular place, and then halfway through the episode, they kind of ushered us out of there, and we had to kind of put
Yeah.
everything on pause, and then we had to find another place. I think we did that one. It was with Antonio Maya. We were talking about compliance, I think, and governance, if I remember correctly, and that was before we started doing video. So of course,
Mm.
when you listen to that episode, I think it's really difficult to pick up that we actually had about a 20-minute break in between the midway through that episode because we had to move, we had to reset up everything. The acoustics is slightly different in a different place. So yeah, it's been interesting. I think we've also come a long way in terms of technology and the way we do things on the show, right? Like the equipment we're using is obviously a little bit better now than what we started with.
Yeah.
Especially when we're at conferences, we really have the mobile recording stuff.
Thank you, Kim.
Yes, and we have to shout out to Camp Technologies for that. They've been a supporter of the show, I think, right since the very beginning. Never shy to kind of help us out with equipment when we need it, and I think we're looking forward to continuing that relationship with them. But it's helped us with our mobile recording because we have pretty much every gadget you need now to set up, and it's always fun when we go into the recording booths at Ignite because they have all the equipment that you could possibly want in there, and then we walk in with all of our stuff as well. And so the techs there just look at us and go, yeah, you guys have probably done this before. And that's
Yeah.
100% is YouTube, right? You guys are the guys who make the show go from a technology perspective. I think for me, uh, like I'm a lot more involved in the scheduling and the sequencing and making sure everything's on time and these people show up and all of that stuff. But the back end work, I mean, Warren, I still don't understand how you do all of the stuff you do on your Mac as far as the audio stuff goes. so so yeah, I mean, look, I think it takes it takes three to do this. It's a tripod here, and we're not all three always on every episode. But I think it's kind of how it rolls, and it desperately works, man. I
But
love you guys. I
yeah,
really
the,
miss
the, the, the
being able to hang
presence
out.
is, I love you too, dude. And the presence is felt. You can
Yeah.
like sort of
Yep.
feel it.
Yep.
When there's like two of us on a show,
Yep.
minus one, it's more like, you know, Warren would make some
It's true.
beep, 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 beep comment right now. And then everybody has a laugh.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, it would be like, and it would like roll over into the next piece. And there's always like some sort of present. And you know what else is pretty cool is um, time zone doesn't matter for nothing. I mean, I know we've picked up a call. It was with the lady that you used to work at Insight. What was her name?
Oh yes, yes, yes. Anna.
Anna. Anna was a beautiful podcast about all the different pieces that went into moving things into the cloud and sort of like this big long journey. And me and Nick had just woken up, but just
Yeah.
purely because of the fact that we were in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
I
it
was gonna
was like,
say the only time it becomes a real challenge is when we have to do
mm,
um, South Africa, the US, and Australia on one call. That
yeah,
becomes sequencing pain because we've done one with Greg Sheridan. And if I remember correctly, I think it was, and we did one with Ashwin Powell as well a little while
we
ago.
did.
I think it was 1 a.m. maybe or 2 a.m. for me. But I
Yeah.
usually kind of, because you guys are in the same time zone, I'll pull the rough end of that one if I have to, because it just gets it done. Plus, it's easier for me to be up and going late at night. I'm not going to wake up any kids or anything like that.
Nick, you've been so quiet, dude. You got to say cool stuff about us, otherwise we're gonna cry.
Do you know, I'm reflecting on everything that the two of you said, and I'm going to start off by a shout out to you for different things, because without Chris, sometimes we wouldn't have something to talk about. And he's pulled topics out of the hat where I think
Oh yeah.
that's amazing. How have we not done a show about this? And the amount of times that Chris and I have done a shout out to the Warren.
The Warren.
Oh my
Where is
God.
the Warren?
Like,
And we
thank God
miss
the
you,
episode is
Warren.
quiet.
No, 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 no. And to be fair, that our un-Warren recorded history reflects that every show where there's no Warren, the Warren is mentioned.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
there's
some,
no blooper reel.
well, actually, I think I'm responsible for a bunch of those. But one of the nice things that we get from the energy that you bring, Warren, is that there's this humanizing element that you bring where we don't just talk about technology, because honestly, without people, none of this
No.
would be worth anything.
Correct.
And one of the great things that we get to do is we get to talk to these amazing people who all suffer from imposter syndrome. They all
Yeah.
think, I'm just me. What have I
Mm.
got to offer anyone in the world? And it really takes sometimes the three of us to pull those nuggets out of those people
Mm.
who are amazing human beings, don't necessarily think of themselves as anything special until they realize that there's somebody looking up at them saying, I wish I could be you. How could I become you? And especially as a dad to two girls, that's a super interesting conversation for me, because I go home and I get to say, do you know that I just met, going to pick on someone, Anna Chu? And you know that she does this thing globally and
Mhm.
influences like 1 billion people, and they're like, wow, that's cool, Dad. How do I do that?
Mm.
And then I get to ask you the question.
Yeah.
And one of the coolest moments ever was when I got to ask Mary Jo Foley a question that my daughter asked, said, you're going to meet MJ. And she only knew who MJ was because I listened to the Windows Weekly podcast.
Mm.
So I was like, ask her, how do I become a reporter? And so I get to ask MJ, and MJ says, don't do that.
Yeah.
You know what I think?
Change your
You
career.
you touch on something there that I think we've already mentioned a couple of times today is the human element, right? It's the cloud and it's the people using it is the important part of this, because I think for us a
And
large part of
making
the
it.
show. Say again.
And making it.
Yeah, and I think an important part of the show is that human element, right? And yes, we like to geek out and get technical, and we certainly want to make sure that we fill the time with technical content that is going to be interesting to folks listening, right? It doesn't matter whether you're a security analyst or whether you're an IT pro or sysadmin, whatever it is you do. We want to make sure that we have something relevant to talk about that is going to be technically interesting to you, but we also like that human element, because that's how we grow and learn as human beings, right? And what's really interesting is I know we did one of the episodes that we did with Anna, and I'll keep picking on Anna because it's easy. Is we were talking about how she did her, got to do her job that she does at Microsoft, right? And my wife works in marketing and advertising, marketing as well. And like Carmen listened to that episode with me in the car. We were driving down to Austin one time, and she was just 100% there. Like she, because oftentimes when I listen to an episode in the car, and if she's with me, she will listen sometimes, but it's not. She's just kind of listening. It's not something that she's always like super interested in. Um, but with that episode in particular, she was so excited and like super interested in hearing what Anna had to say about how she kind of got to where she is and what she does. And so I think that's kind of nice to be able to transcend, I guess, something that isn't just 100% technical all the time, and it has that human element to it, which is kind of important, I think.
And there's always that connection
Yep.
between the two. You always ask for like a personal story. I mean, I
Mm.
remember Ross Smith, or uh, one of the typical examples again, Greg Taylor. Greg Taylor's always got a really cool story. I mean, you look at Brent as well, as far as the exchange guys are concerned. They always got,
Mm.
and uh, calendaring with Julia, right? So uh, it was like, I love you more than calendaring.
Yes.
Remember that?
Yes. Her
Um,
marriage vows.
yeah, her marriage, I love you more
Yeah.
than calendaring or something. And we were like, really? And so
Yeah.
the thing is, the technology is married to the person who's in charge of
Yeah.
it in some sort of weird, strange way. And there's like something insane that has happened in their life. Like, I mean, I don't know why it rings out in my brain, but like a child being born on the release of a CU update or something. I can't remember what it was, but like each sort of time. And then when we chatted to Mary Jo Foley, and she was like, okay, well, I actually told Steve Jobs to get lost. And you're like, hold on a minute.
Yeah.
That's like a
Yeah.
legendary story. Why
Yeah.
don't I know
Yeah.
about it? Or
Yeah.
and it's got to do with a personal perspective. Is she didn't know who Steve Jobs was at the time, and then the "I love you more than calendaring" thing means, well, there's a little bit more than the technology, but also at the same token, the technology is incredibly important to these people,
Mm.
and these are what they try to portray to the world. And I think that's a great segue to sort of push the conversation into that. Perhaps we had an episode. It was called The Unsung Heroes.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember?
Yep.
And the Unsung Heroes about the documentation team.
Yep.
And
Yes.
you go and you look at the documentation team, and look, since working for Microsoft, I understand that what goes into the documentation, and that if it's not in the documentation, there is some sort of service level agreement that becomes expensive. But you didn't say X in the documentation. And you can only imagine the contribution factor that goes into these documents. And
Mm.
they were there, right? They gave us a personal explanation.
Yes.
They gave us a personal explanation onto how it was that they felt about the documentation.
Mm.
um, and you have Aaron leading up the docs, sort of learn, and the way learn is moving and why they decided to go a specific way.
Mm.
It's not just this big ignite massive presentation. Look at all our cool stuff. It's more, well, there's a reason the technology exists. It exists because people like you happen to want it, but it's also because I happen to want it, and
Yeah.
it's there. you know. So
I,
I find
so I
that.
got to
Yeah.
detract just a little bit and say that dance move over there is going to make its way into some blooper reel at some point.
True.
uh, um, so yeah, I mean, I think it's been a good however many years now. 55 episodes in total, episode 50. Um, but how about we talk about something a little more technical here, or at least something a little bit more topical. Uh, what do you guys got? What's going on with you guys at the moment? Like, what are you
Can we not
working on?
mention the outage that happened last week?
Well, I mean, I'm sure we can get to that or not get to that. But what are you guys spending your time on at the moment? What is lighting up or bubbling up in your worlds today, Warren?
Uh, so look, the outage thing's a thing, um, and when you look at it, like, it wasn't even necessarily an outage. It's more, things are moving so quickly, and there's a lot of perspectives on it. Is so I've read a couple of articles around how many updates can they release for teams. I mean, why are there so many? Why are they going so quickly? Um, because you asked for them. Okay. But then the big enterprise companies who take time to adopt certain features, I clearly understand. And obviously there's certain ways of introducing these features into the organization. And now the same thing works as what is the DevOps term? I think it's fail fast, fail hard, or I can't remember the exact
No,
terminology,
you're
but
just describing my childhood there. That's all that is.
exactly, fail fast, fail hard. And like, the velocity of deployment.
Mhm.
Um, so if we have to look at the outage, okay, and the public root cause analysis says there was a sort of deployment that happened, and there was a key inside of Azure AD that retained longer than it should have. But because of that fact, and because of there's so much deployment happening all the way around the world, and there's this cascading deployment that goes, when you revert a change, the revert takes as long as the initial deployment does, right? And so the outage, even though it was resolved an hour later than it, than we noticed, or then the security team noticed, it took another 12 hours before that change was eventually replicated. But that's obviously got to do with the velocity of what happens on a daily basis, how many servers get deployed, what updates get made. So do we go back to the days of deploying slower, or do we keep to where they are now, or what is it that we, as global companies, what is it that you do to then make everybody happy? And I can guarantee you that there is no way. There
No,
is no way.
you can't make
Somebody's
everyone happy.
always going to have an issue. I mean, after Ignite, I heard people talking about, wow, geez, what is this whole Burning Man festival that Microsoft's invested to? I mean, is everybody going to be wearing VR headsets and taking LSD and visiting these big Burning Man, Cirque du Soleil sort of vibes happening around here? But that's not the point. The point is that the technology is going to be used for many things. There's going to be 24-hour-a-day virtual surgeries and all that kind of stuff. But what I'm trying to say is, like, you'll never ever fix everybody's issues. And I get that certain people place a lot of money, time, investment, people on certain things, but I don't know, you can't fix everything. I think
You
that's
can't. I think that the challenges we're in, it's uncharted territory, right? With just the sheer kind of scale of the service, and then all of these updates that are constantly flowing through. Um, it's a tricky balance, because you on the one hand, you don't want to revert back to the old school, like, oh, well, we'll send you an update every 3 months and it will just be massive, right? It doesn't scale when you do that. But at the same time, I do understand, and I can feel the pain of large organizations who just are trying to get their users to, come along on this journey. And
when was the last time you deployed an Exchange patch? Number one, and let's talk about that for a sec. Is there was a big Exchange vulnerability that was found out,
Mhm.
like massive across the board for everybody that's on prem.
Four, actually, I think
And
4 CVEs, I
right
think. Yeah.
now you go and you say, okay, well, your support for Exchange 2010 ended like a millennia ago, but Microsoft still releases a patch so that you don't get taken down by this specific vulnerability, um, which saves a bunch of people. Um, but again, they didn't have to.
Mm.
They didn't have to release it. They could have said, okay, well, you're out of support for like not just 10 years, but 13 years you're out of support. So we weren't going to patch your stuff. I mean, that's your issue for not updating, but they didn't. But then you go and you see this Active Directory outage that happens, and everybody's like, oh, geez, you can't use Microsoft Active Directory. It's a problem. I mean, guys, hold on, hold the phone. Superman has some kryptonite right here. And then what happens is it goes.
I mean, I think
But
that's a
like
valid
this
point, right?
stuff like this happens all the time, right?
You're never thanked or praised for the things you do
Mhm.
well in comparison to the things that go bad, right? You're
Exactly.
that's it's always going to stick in people's minds. I think it's just a cultural thing it's a culture that we live in. People are always going to remember the bad, right? But I think this highlights a couple of things. So to your point, with those Exchange CVEs, Microsoft actually released patches for out of date versions of Exchange as well, which I think that's the first time they've ever done that. And I was reading a Scotch Noel article just recently about this. So if your Exchange server wasn't at the latest CU, so you could get the actual security fixes, they actually released wedge updates for those older out of date versions. Again,
Yep.
didn't have to do that, right? But
Nope.
they take it seriously enough to go, you know what, we need to account for some of these folks who are not updating as frequently as they should be, and we want to help them out as well. But the other thing that I think it raises a question, or at least in my mind, the discussion, and we've had this discussion before on the show, is when you look at something like Azure AD, should you be monitoring that yourself so that you can get ahead of outages? And because outages are still going to happen, right? Love them or hate them, like we can do everything we can to mitigate every single outage, but the reality is at some point something's still going to go wrong, and you're gonna now, where do you want to be at that point? Do you want to be reacting to that outage, or do you want to be the one getting in front of the users and saying, hey folks, we've noticed this thing, we've picked up on this outage, we're coming up with some sort of strategy to try and lessen and ease the pain? So I definitely think it does raise that conversation again of, should we be monitoring stuff independently of the monitoring tools that Microsoft give us, right? So that's, my two cents
Let
on
me
that.
interject on something there, and
Yep.
it kind of depends on where you're at as a business, because it also takes us into this whole thing of, well, I'm paying for a service and it should be always on, except it's on within its SLA. And to be fair to Microsoft, the number of outages are still well within the published SLA that's out there. And the other thing is that there's this whole thing about confusion around, should I back up stuff that I put into a public cloud service like Office 365 or Azure, because the cloud does it all for me, which is a fundamental misunderstanding of what a backup is and isn't. And talking of conversations that we're having these days, a lot of it is around understanding what is your actual business requirement, and if cloud doesn't meet that requirement and its default state, then
Yep.
you need to be spending money. And if one of your business requirements is to manage SLAs, then for sure you need to be managing the availability or the lack thereof of a cloud service, no matter whose cloud service it is, because maybe 4 nines isn't good enough for you. And I've had customers who have gone from 3 nines to 4 nines on storage services in Azure, for example, and Warren will know who I'm talking about there, because they decided to replicate all of the SSD storage from one region to another region so that they could get 3 nines in two locations, because normal storage gave them 4 nines and SSD only gave them three. That wasn't good enough. And for them, that was critical enough to double their storage spend. Not every customer is in that boat, but what it does boil down to is understand what your requirements are. And as you go into cloud, make sure that you can meet your requirements in one way or another. And if that means going to a backup vendor and backing up Office 365 so that your internal SLAs and the promises that your business has made to its users are kept, then buy backup. If the versioning in Office 365 and SharePoint and the single item retention that Exchange gives you fits inside your definition of backup,
Then
hey,
leave
you're
it.
winning.
Yep. But
Absolutely. Then don't spend money.
again, but it also comes to, and I have an analogy around insecurity around this as well, right? It comes to, so understanding requirements is one, but being whole in your requirement. So having a requirement to back up all your stuff, that's only one half of the equation. You need to be able to figure out how to restore that when it
Yeah.
actually happens, right? Because when the rubber meets the road, what good is all of this backed up data if you don't have a process that is streamlined and that can restore it?
Yeah, but
And if you
the
decide, go ahead.
no, the difference is, again, with Nick, is understanding the difference between the two. So
Of
like,
course, of course.
if you've got an RPO of 0, right? An RPO or an RPO of 0, it is no longer disaster recovery. It no longer includes a backup. Why? Because a decision to go DR takes time.
Yeah,
That
and the
time immediately puts you out of the RPO piece, which means
correct.
you're doing a high availability, right? So
Yep.
is it high availability or is it disaster recovery? If it's disaster recovery, then it goes to your point, which is, can we back up? Can we restore? And can
Yeah.
we do so without impacting production? Is the
Yep.
answer yes? Cool.
Yep.
Fine. So the difference between the high availability and the disaster recovery, and again, everybody's like, oh, but we have to abide by this law and that law and this law and that law. And I said, okay, hold on a second. Well, what does the law say? Does the law say you need X, Y, Z? Okay. So can we prove X, Y, Z with this? No. Why not? Are you sure? And so there's a lot of times where it's like, but I mean, like if you look at geo-redundant zone replicated storage in Azure now, which is basically 2 regions with availability zones, 16 nines.
Right.
16 nines.
Yeah.
Okay.
Show me
And
something on premises that's going to give you that.
16 nines. And they're like, okay, but Azure Active Directory went down the other day. Oh, okay. Well, let's compartmentalize for a bit. Let's understand what your requirements are. I mean, granted, there's a service principal that you happen to be connecting to Dynamics 365, which contains all of your customer data. You weren't affected. Why? Because the token didn't expire. So you're good. You're good. But Auntie Joan in the front who answers the phone, she couldn't log into her Azure Active Directory. And the guys that were supposed to be making changes that evening couldn't exactly make the changes because they had certain time window. That I understand. But it's like, did you experience an outage on your services that live within inside Azure? And the answer is no. Did I perhaps interrupt your sleep when you had scheduled the change? Yeah, okay. I'm sorry. I apologize most profusely. It was a mistake. But like what I'm saying is there's degrees of severity and it's like you say, Nick, we like sort of I keep saying we. That's because I'm on too many meetings at the time. But um when Microsoft goes and they attach these SLAs to these products and you mess up the SLA, there's a penalty. And Microsoft take it very, very seriously, these sorts of things. So yeah, perhaps maybe you weren't able to, deploy a managed instance in that couple of hours, or you weren't able to deploy a new storage account in that time. Understandable. But did, let's say, the storage that was configured correctly with the right key vault on the right private endpoint go down? The answer is no. Was any data lost? No. So there's a lot of degrees of severity here. And again, like if we have to look at Solarigate, which is what they're calling it, right? Solarigate. Yes, Microsoft employees were compromised by the scandal. Okay, well, you know what? That's what zero trust is there for, right? And I can almost guarantee you that this is happening to every single company, every single day, where some sort of employee gets compromised because they went and they had coffee at the Starbucks. And then you look at the Solarigate and it's like, okay, well, the government the government got hacked here. So now it's a big issue. But what about everybody else that was hacked by the Solarigate scandal? I mean, like, how many customers do you have using SolarWinds products?
Oh yeah, I'd venture to guess a bunch, right? I don't know specifically, but I think that there are a fair few. But I mean, you can use the F5 scenario from a few months prior just as well, right? I mean, I would venture to say significantly more folks had issues with that, and
Yeah.
and realistically, like, why would you need your management interface open to the internet to begin with, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, the examples are endless here. I think also your point of severity is an important one. But again, like everyone says, oh, but we don't want to use Azure AD. We want to keep everything in house and on prem because we can control the whether there's an outage or not. Well, you can't control whether the guy with the backhoe rips out your fiber by mistake, right? And what would you say in that situation? You'd be like, well, it's not our fault. It is what it is. It sucks,
Yeah.
and we'll get back online as quickly as we can.
It's the guy with the spade. Go
Yeah,
talk to him.
and
Yeah, sure.
exactly. And so now, when these things happen in Azure AD or in the service, yeah, it's potentially some guy with a backhoe. You just don't know about it, right? And again, I think there are. I mean, there really isn't anything you can do. This is the world we live in now, but you can be better prepared for it, right? We
Yes.
had about a month ago, we had some really, really crazy weather here in Texas. Um, to the
I
point
heard
where
they
now, you know,
saw
in
some
it
Dutchmen
was
making snow angels.
it was well below zero here. Now in in old money, we were at minus 18 Celsius here
Wow.
at one point. Now obviously I'm not from a cold place, right? But I spent some time working in some of the colder parts of the US in during the winter, so I'm relatively accustomed to snow and ice and stuff like that. But the difference is here in Texas, we're not prepared for that kind of stuff. We don't have the infrastructure to support, constant salting of the roads and all of that stuff. And even us here at home, we knew the weather was coming in, and everyone had said, "Oh, it's going to be a cold weekend, and there's going to be some ice and some storms, and it's going to go below zero." And we're like, "Okay, cool." And so I remember on the Friday, this all happened sort of Sundays when everything started. So Friday night, I went across the road to the supermarket, and I pulled in, and I thought the whole parking lot's full. Like, I live in Texas, like we never have issue with parking ever. All right. And I thought this is ridiculous. And I went inside, and the lines for the checkout were like stretching around the store. And I thought, like, I'm just getting chips and dip and a couple of other things because we had some
So no
friends coming
toilet
over.
paper.
No, I didn't. I mean, I didn't get any of this like crazy stuff, right? I was just getting stuff for that night. And everyone was like clearing the shelves. And I was like, what are people expecting exactly here? Right. And I think that the reality was kind of somewhere in between my brushing the situation off and like what the naysayers had said, right? It was kind of in the middle, because what actually had happened was when the snow happened, we lost power, and we didn't I mean, I don't live in South Africa anymore. I don't know what power outages are. So I wasn't expecting to lose power. So that was a problem for us, because power went out on Sunday night, and the house was nice and warm because the heat was running. So we were like, oh, we'll go to bed. It'll be back up in the morning. We woke up. No, power's still not on. And now we're negative outside. So the house is starting to cool down. Um, and it got really cold inside, and we had to leave and go find somewhere else to be, because it was just cold. But then, because of all the snow and the ice on the roads, people
Couldn't go anywhere.
couldn't leave, get out anywhere, right? And or more importantly, supply chain couldn't operate, so we couldn't get food into the supermarkets. And even by Tuesday afternoon, our power was restored, and we were fine. We were having outages every 3 hours, I think. But I could keep all my equipment online with UPS, so we were able to work and do all of our regular stuff. But we weren't able to find food anywhere because all the supermarkets around the area, their refrigeration units had gone out, so they weren't allowed to
Ah.
sell any of the fresh produce
That's
anymore.
insane.
So like
It's like a zombie apocalypse.
I've never
It's like
seen this. Like,
those movies.
you walk into the supermarket, and folks, like, they had tape across you couldn't open any of the refrigeration units except for beer. If you wanted beer, you could get that, but you couldn't get anything out of the refrigerated section, right? So,
Hey,
for a
text.
week or two, we were living off some canned goods and stuff. And to make it worse, is like, we go camping a lot, so we have a lot of camping, like propane stove and kettle and just everything that we could have used to survive, lights, everything in the house without power. But all of the stuff was in the storage locker like 2 blocks away, and I didn't think to get it because I didn't anticipate that the problem. And that's
Wow.
a very long story to make the point of that. Like, if you're prepared for something, generally it's going to be a lot easier to deal with it than when you're not prepared at all, and this thing comes along, right? um
Yeah.
so anyway, we got through it okay, but it could have been a lot easier on all of us if we had just been a little bit more prepared. So Azure AD outage, multi-factor outage, all of these things, if you think about these scenarios now, because they're not pie in the sky, this will never happen to me scenarios, plan for it. Think about what you're going to do the next time that thing happens, and how you're going to be notified, and how you're going to be alerted, and how you're going to alert your customers or users. If you do these things, it may be a little easier to handle than just, oh no, I got to wake up early, or I'm getting pulled out of bed in the middle of the night because Azure AD's gone down.
Yeah.
And I guess where
Yeah.
do you draw the line, right?
Yep.
Because you've got what happened to you there, right? Then you've got these oaks that you watch on the Discovery Channel called like the preppers.
Yes.
And right, they have their entire basement covered in baked beans.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like that. I mean, they're prepared to live off of their basement for the next 25 years. And then you
And
think to
generate
yourself,
their
well,
own energy and methane.
yes, methane from feces. I hear it's a thing. Uh, but
We will
anyway,
not be going into that on this
okay,
episode.
like if we if we have to think about it logically and we say, okay, well, from an Azure AD perspective, okay, how long before the baked beans change the shape of their can? Or how long before the baked beans expire? Or how long before the baked beans start changing their flavor, etc., etc.? And we start to think about these things moving forward, saying, well, there's a good chance that this technology is going to change in the next 8 hours.
Mhm.
Because that's how fast things are moving nowadays.
Yeah.
And we well, again, where do you draw the line? What do we do? How do we move forward? And then they get into this analysis paralysis of, okay, I am frozen in fear now. I'm not leaving my house until the zombie apocalypse.
So I'd like to add my 20
Please do.
cents on that one. And being a CEO means I get to do beginning of the year messages to the company employees and generally just like what are we doing this year and what did we learn from last year? And last year was an exceptionally difficult year for everyone, unless you were a mollusk under a rock. Last year wasn't pleasant. But one of the takeaways, and I think this speaks directly to where we're at with cloud, is change is here to stay. And unless you one of our exceptionally few data center only customers, your rate of change isn't changing. And I remember one of the guests that we had on the show that called out that, and Chris is going to remember her name when I mentioned this. She worked for a global marketing company, and she said that if Microsoft decreases the rate of change of the number of changes coming to Teams every week and every month, that as millennials, they're going to get bored and they'll move to a competing product. And one of the things that I said in my message from last year to this year was that last year was really difficult. We probably expect this year to be difficult. However, that doesn't mean that we need to cower in fear and not do anything and wait for the wave to hit. It's more of a case of we've learned how to deal with last year, and now we have the tools to deal with this year. So we're still in the way that the world is, but it doesn't mean that we need to cower in fear. We now have the tools to deal with this year. And that means we carry on, we keep on executing, we keep on being human, we keep on communicating, and we all despise not seeing each other in person. And that is a huge strain on a lot of us. But we do know how to deal with it. And to talk about the amount of change that we have in cloud, it's inconvenient. However, it gives us a benefit that's disproportionate, I would argue, to the amount of discomfort that it brings. And with that, if I look at the few outages that I can literally count on one hand in cloud that have affected us in some way or another, literally over the last 10 years that we've been in cloud or longer, I think that's okay. And we now know how to deal with it. There's ways of monitoring, there's ways of mitigating. And I get that from a cloud point of view, we're getting into a very different kind of disaster scenario of all eggs in one basket in a different way. But to be fair, cloud is also designed to survive massive outages that
It's
my
a
data
really
center
big
based customers
basket.
couldn't. It's a huge basket. And so my takeaway from this show and where I'd like to land the show from a personal note is that all is not lost. We know how to deal with outages. We know how to deal with what this year is bringing us. And as much as we don't like what's happened, we've become more resilient as a result. And at least that's a good thing as a takeaway. I don't know how you guys feel about that.
No, I think that's
Completely agree.
very important. I think it's important to reflect on the good things that have come out of it instead of just standing there with your arms crossed and just shaking your head at the bad, right? Because inevitably.
Warren, uncross your arms.
I was thinking about that, but I thought it would be like too like. Oh, no, wait, maybe I should.
Yes, I think it's important to kind of take that away. I think for many organizations, there's been a lot of good has come out of it, or at least a lot of positive, right? So I think that's a very very important statement. What I'd like to kind of close on, I guess, or where I kind of want to be is I want to say to the listener, if you listen to this and you have areas that you're interested in, things that you want to hear us talk about, topics you want us to explore, you want to come on the show and talk about something, reach out to us on socials. I think that's Twitter probably is the easiest, but at the Cloud Arc, reach out to us. We love putting the show on and putting this together, but also without interest from the audience, it's just three guys talking, right? So that's kind of where I want to kind of leave off. And we have some exciting things that we're thinking about as far as future guests and future episodes, and hopefully once in-person events come back, we might be able to I think celebrate that by doing something together as well. I think, which we've certainly discussed and kicked around ideas. So reach out to us. We love any feedback, unless it's negative feedback. No, I'm just kidding. We love any feedback. So that's that's it from me, I think.
Yeah, I think
Warren.
everybody just needs to keep being awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I feel like that's a shirt you should get.
It is. Yes. What am I wearing today? Oh, it is. But you know what? I think all in all, and I'm going to take it like really, really big now. Is I guess everybody as a human race hasn't become terrible. I think if we have to look at the entire global pandemic in this one big, massive basket, like there's a lot of good that's come out of it. I mean, I know there's a lot of bad that has happened, but there's also a lot of good that has sort of come out of it. I think people respect things a lot more, and I think that just in general, we're very social human beings. I miss giving you guys a hug. I'm gonna give you a big virtual hug, and so we miss giving each other hugs, but also at the same token, we've invented technologies to try fix the issue, and I think that that's very important for us to take away. And it's like Nick said, all hope is not lost, and it's a great podcast that we've put together over the years just by doing the things that we love, and I think it would be cool if people tell us what they love about it. So I agree with you.
Yeah. Cool. Well, look, guys, this has been a lot of fun for me. It's my morning, so I'm kind of getting to kick my day off in a really positive note. But yeah, we miss hanging out with you guys. Hopefully that'll be something we get to do again soon, and
Oh yeah,
we'll certainly catch up again for another episode. So until
definitely.
then, thanks again.
Cheers, guys.
Good night, y'all.